Hey guys, welcome back to the Rollout. I am Linsay Rousseau.
And I'm Genevieve Marie. Hello and welcome.
Hey, we have an amazing episode for you guys today. I think you're going to really enjoy some of the things that we have in store. And of course, if you love what you're watching, please subscribe to this channel. Give us a like down below. Hit that notification bell. If you want some more cool stuff, head on over to the Culture Slate Patreon page for behind the scenes videos and merch and lots of other fun stuff. And of course, you can always go to cultureslate.com. So, okay. So today we are diving into creature voices and monster voices and all those cool things that can help level up your tabletop gaming experience and potentially your life. I mean, who knows? So we are joined by two amazing guests here. We've got Scott Lambright and we have Mark. Oh my gosh, Garrett. I knew I was going to mess it up. I was like scrolling real quick because I was like, I've only ever known you as Mark G. And I was like,
I like that it was followed up by a question mark, though. You knew you didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew I didn't know. I went for it, though.
If I ever need a stage name or a pen name or something, I think I might go with Mark Gatz. That's pretty good.
I like it.
Mark Gatz. Yeah. That does sound pretty like upper tier.
Yeah, it's like,
Right.
hello, everybody. I'm Mark Gatz.
So why don't you guys introduce yourselves real quick? Mark, since we were just talking about you, tell everybody who you are, where they can find you.
Sure. So my name is Mark Gatz. So my name is Mark, and I'm predominantly a metal musician. And most of my time is spent doing vocal coaching on like death metal and deathcore vocals. I've got a YouTube channel, Kardavoc Academy, and a band called Kardashev, and that's what I do. So, music, vocal coaching, and YouTube. That's about it.
And Scott, tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Scott Lambright. I'm a voice actor based out of Los Angeles, and I work primarily in television, film, video games, and when I'm not doing, spoken word at open mics when those used to exist, I'm doing horrifying monsters, creatures, zombies, infected, whatever they want to call it, to not call it zombies, all of that.
Yeah, the infected. I love that. And
Yeah.
you're just like,
Infected, the disease, the wretched, there's always names.
especially when it's a code-named video game and they're like, you're infected. And I'm like, I'm a zombie. And they're like,
No, you're not dead. Like, but I'm infected, decaying. No, but you're not. I'm a zombie.
Yeah.
Semantics.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And obviously, for those of you who watch the show, I'm also a voice actor and kind of not as much as Scott, but I tend to be cast a lot doing the screamy, shouty, dying, ogre type voices and stuff. So
you've never been a voice actor till you've had to do 5 seconds on fire.
Oh yes.
Oh.
Yeah, and electrocution. I'm a big fan of electrocution too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so and it's really funny. So Mark and I play D&D together. Scott, I know you have played D&D forever and ever and ever.
Yep. For years.
And I when I would play, people are like, "Oh, you're a voice actor." I want to know how. Like, I'm a DM, and I really want to know how to like do some of these cool NPC characters and monster characters, and how to make a fuller experience for the players. I don't know how to do that. So maybe both of you guys just kind of dive into, what it is you do and how we can do it. I know that's a super big open question, but
yeah.
Okay, let's start with this. So Mark, if someone's like, I want to be a 10-foot tall, ogre or something, or if you're coaching someone who's wanting to do that types of things, like what are some things that people can do to kind of produce these sounds? But, and we've talked to voice actors before in the show, also do it safely, of course.
You're right. That is a very big question. But I would probably tell them first and foremost, it's all going to be about relaxing and creating space, right? It's going to be about really relaxing the throat rather than trying to get like deeper by like doing the fake deep voice, more so opening, creating space in the back of the throat, maybe a little tongue curl in there as well. And then I would start teaching them just a basic false chord like noise so that when they put it together, they can get like some of those more beefy. That's a very death metal sound, admittedly. But if they were like, hey, I want to sound like a death metal troll or a death metal ogre, I'd be like, well, this is a good place to start, and then we'd probably tinker and poke and prod from there. But yeah, relaxation and openness is way more important and you're totally welcome to be like, actually, Mark, that's totally wrong.
No, you're up.
That's where I would start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Scott, yeah, same with you. Like, how do you go about when you're presented with some of these different creatures that you're having to do for different things? How do you go about creating those voices and figuring out how they sound and placements?
Let's start with 5 seconds of being on fire.
I mean, that too.
We usually say that at the end of the session.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. So Genevieve, SAG protocol. We keep all dying until the end. So okay, so here you go, chat or viewers, stay till the end, and maybe we'll all catch ourselves on fire.
Maybe.
I don't have any sessions this week. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Mark said, yes. Relaxation is the most important thing. You don't want any tension when you're doing anything. I always tell people, if you want tension in acting, put your tension right between your eyes, and that's it. That's the only place to have tension. Or maybe the tips of your fingers, nowhere else. Your voice, nothing. So, like when you're doing a 8-foot character, in my last D&D campaign, I played Killrock, a Goliath barbarian, and just all I did was I opened my throat up greater, slow him down, because just slowing your pace is going to make them seem bigger because they're going to sound more important. They want people to listen. So that already is going to get the psychological, this guy's big. And then, like he said, a false chord, he wasn't too gruff because he was, charismatic. He wasn't going, I'm Killrock. So it helps to kind of know about things because if someone's got that like horrifying, scary sound, they probably aren't going to speak too much, or they're going to be, when they speak, it's going to be intimidating. So that's stuff to know too. So think of like pop music. Pop music, understand, it's very clear. Underground death metal, you have to listen going like, what did he say? What? What was that?
Can you enunciate while you're screaming?
Yeah.
It's actually, you can definitely kind of combine both. The harsher, like melodic death metal has a lot of that where it's more like, but like, there's still melody. Of course, Mark knows much more and can demonstrate much better than I can. But that's how you got to get your friends into it. Like, oh, no, this is hard, but there's melody. And they're like, oh, yeah, that is. And that's how you trick them.
You're totally right. You can mix in a little bit of true chord phonation in there. You can the trick is, if you want to articulate your metal vocals, you have to almost like over articulate and really like understand like being snappy with consonants. You got to be very, very snappy. Otherwise it's just going to sound like a muddy mess, which admittedly sometimes that's the sound you want. Sometimes you want that just like
the like necrophagist, very just is just that.
Hey,
it's disgusting.
That wasn't bad. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, okay, so actually, sorry, go ahead, Genevieve.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, this is kind of the same for when you go into the studio to record. I mean, everybody in D&D, they're sitting around a table and, you got, your snacks. So it's kind of like you're crafty. Is there something you should never eat or drink before going into the studio? Or like even when you're sitting around a table and you're getting ready for a nice long like 4 to 6 hour game, and you're gonna have to have that sitting in there. Is there something you should never eat or drink when doing a voice, when doing character voices?
You can take this one first, Scott, if you want.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't drink coffee or anything like that, but I know coffee is a bad one that really dries your cords out. Some people say don't drink milk or milky things, but if I'm doing creaturey gross stuff, I find that like a mango smoothie is the best thing, because it gets me so phlegmy. If they want something wet and disgusting, they want something dry and just bony, then I just drink water because the phlegm will kind of show up. But don't drink that. Spicy stuff, I only say don't the day before, because in a session once I was doing loud like screaming and dying, and I had a flake of capsaicin just pop into my mouth mid-scream. And I was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I ate Thai food last night. I'm going to go get some water right now. And it was really funny, but yeah, that's the only things I can think about. I mean, I personally like eating kind of whatever cookies in sessions, but everyone's different. Some are vegan, some will say this. So it kind of depends on who you are and knowing what you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely things that hands down are always going to be a bad idea. Caffeine, although it affects a lot of people differently, I've never met anybody who's like, oh yeah, I just like pound a bunch of black coffee and I'm ready to, like, I've never that, it's going to give you that like dry sensation for sure. Smoking is smoking anything, right? Whatever you want to smoke or vape, like there's just so much peer reviewed science saying that it's going to shrivel your cords up. And as for, I totally agree with you, Scott. Dairy is kind of an iffy one because some people, they drink dairy and they're like, I've never gotten phlegmy from dairy in my life. With me, like if I've got a full day, because if I'm doing like like tomorrow, if I'm going to do like a full day of like 6 lessons, I'm going to be pretty dairy free that day.
Wow.
You know what I mean? But it can depend on the sound that you want. So I think I get this question a lot, and I think more so than like creating a list of things to stay away from. I always tell people like caffeine, smoke, and alcohol pretty much always, and then just listen to your body on the other stuff. Because like dairy is a no-go for me, but I know people who have no reaction. I'm a little jelly, but it's what it is.
Yeah.
I will say the thing I drink that does help is just honey and lemon juice and warm water. That's what I always drink whenever I have an intense day. Just thermos full of it, pound it back. Because I learned that from Andy Serkis. That's what he called his gollum juice.
Oh,
doing
really?
that for like 19 hours.
Yeah.
I was like,
that's a good point.
Well, because
That's good.
his voice, he had to sustain that
Yeah.
real gravelly, sort of. Yeah. Well, let's just rewind a little bit. Because I'm really fascinated. Like, I know why I got into the industry, but I'm really just like for both of you, let's start with you, Mark. Like, how did you decide to go into death metal? And then how did you figure out how to safely do the sounds that you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I got into it. So I did not like death metal or deathcore at all. I don't even think we called it deathcore back then. I'm not sure. I got into it like probably 2006, 2005. And my sister, she was into like all the heavier music. And it's funny that you mentioned Necrophagus because she had an album by them and Job for a Cowboy, who's they're big now, but at the time they were Arizona local band. And I remember Johnny Davey, the vocalist for Job for a Cowboy, he did like this pig squeal vocal. And I remember being like, humans can do that? And I was like, this sounds so dumb. And then the next day I was like, I'm gonna listen to this again and just make fun of it. And then a week later I was like, this is amazing. And so it was like almost infectious. Like I'm sure everyone here can relate to hearing a sound and being like, I got to figure out how to do that. Like I got to figure out, and you're just sitting in your room and you're like doing all these weird things. And as far as doing it safely, I was lucky because I actually went to school for, I didn't finish my degree because I got really, really sick, but I went to school for speech therapy and speech sciences. So I was listening to all this death metal and then spending like, hours and hours in a day studying vocal anatomy and vocal production and, consonants and vocal acoustics and things like that. So I had a little bit of a leg up in that respect because I could be like, oh, this diagram, okay, what does that feel like? Okay, it's probably this little flappy bit, And I took it real slow, and I was totally that weird guy at the bus stop who like everybody's standing at the bus stop, and I'm over here waiting for like the bus in college, and I'm like, just doing all these like terrible sounding vocals. That was this guy.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. And Scott, how about for you? Because, you do so many different weird creaturey type things. Like, how did you get into this? How did, and then figure out how to do all the different things?
Very much just being a kid at heart. I grew up watching movies like Aliens, Predator, all that stuff. And like, they scared me so much, but I kept watching them. And I don't know, when I was in elementary school, I used to get bored when it was super quiet during a test, and I would just like go. And the thing is, that thing, you can't place the sound, but it goes everywhere. And they're like, what is that?
That's amazing.
And so I would just do that, like bored in class at friends, like, Scott, do the sound.
Do it closer to the mic. Do it again.
Oh.
Closer to the mic.
And you just modulate it, and you can kind of do anything with that.
That's amazing.
And so I just started playing with sounds like that. And just, if you add that trill, but then you make a sound with it. You can kind of get like a dog, like a, and then if you add like the false chord to it, you can kind of get something more disgusting and weird. And if you plug your nose, you can do very odd things by combining sounds. And I would just be bored doing this stuff when I was a kid. Of like, I'd point to the sky, oh, look, it's pterodactyl. All that silly stuff. Yeah. And then just start experimenting, finding more ways to do it, because I got bored easily of like, You can do a screech, but can you do like a and you can really change and modulate. And I have no tension doing that stuff because just I've always been a loose kind of person from doing martial arts for so long of like, be loose, go with the flow. And I was an actor since I was 5. My first role on stage was Noah in Catholic school. Now I'm playing horrible demons. So listening to metal and all that stuff. I mean, hey, you get where you get.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of just experimenting, liking acting, liking characters, and kind of not really taking stake in like, oh, I only want to be the lead. I'm like, I want to do kind of everything. And so in Hollywood, I've fallen into being monsters and dying and screaming a bunch.
I mean, someone's got to do it. I mean, you've got, for all the big names you have the D. Bradley Bakers who just, that's what they do, is all the weird noises.
Exactly. And as long as you can put, because like a noise is a noise, like you can be a monster, there's no character behind it. But if you give it the acting chops of the intent, the want, the desire, the motivation, then it's no longer, I'm just making sound. It's like, I'm existing and these are the sounds that come out of me to get to what I'm doing. Right. Now it's that has something more than just making a sound. And that's what really separates an actor from just someone who can make noise. We all make noises. Like babies are like the best voice actors ever.
Yes.
They definitely are.
Yeah.
They're also the best metal vocalists ever.
Oh,
Sometimes like the growls and like the fries and the whistle tones that come out of them, you're just like, God, how are you 3 months old and you're better at this than me? For what?
Well, and I assume the same thing's probably true for you, Mark, because music and performing, it's acting. It's got emotion, it's got performance. So it's like you're not just screaming, you have intent and purpose behind that. So that's actually, because to Scott's point about giving character to it, I assume you have a similar situation like when you're performing.
So it is definitely very, very similar in that there's a difference between a vocalist and someone who can make the sound. Like those are two very different things. But I will say that we're lucky in that we kind of coin our own voices, and we're, like I'm going to go into the studio and I'm going to be Mark every day. You know what I mean? Like I've got my catalog of screams, and of course we're always trying to expand it, but it's never like, okay, for this song I have to be this character I've never been before. Unless there are some bands that play it that way though. But I will definitely say that that's like, that is a big thing in death metal and deathcore. You can listening to a band or an album, you can be like, wow, this guy sounds really cool. He is making noises on beat. And then listening to a vocalist who you're like, holy cow, this guy is conveying like a serious message. Like there is like Travis Ryan, Cattle Decapitation, one of my favorites. You're like, there is a lot of like intent and thought and connection to lyrical content and being driven by the music versus just being like, I can do gutturals, guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there definitely is that. And you're always a little nervous as a vocalist. You're like, have I fallen into that? Is that who I am now?
Right.
Well,
you said you have different types of screams that you do. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So, they mostly develop over time, and at first it was just like the basic. Most of what I do, almost everything I do, is with some exception, is built on some sort of variation of a false chord sound. That's most of what I do, just because I always tell my students this, I'm kind of a lazy vocalist, right? False chord, relax, activate, go. Fry is much more of like a balance of the vocal folds and getting like that perfect like little crackly sound. But most everything I do is some variation of a false chord, either letting true chord phonation through. Like if I'm looking and it's super loud, so I don't think I'll do it because it's like super loud. But like if I'm doing this pain sound, I might like activate that false chord sound with my true chord phonation, so it sounds more like a wailing and I'm getting some of those voice cracks. If I'm going for like a demon, I might like get a little bit of that like goblin, snarl, like that sort of sound. Or if I'm really trying to like sound way out there, something more like right. But it's a lot more like, what are these lyrics about versus like, what is this troll's intention? What does he want? Why is he killing and eating billy goats walking across his bridge? Where did this start? You know what I mean? There's not as much of that, at least for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. So obviously you guys are both gamers. when you got into it, I mean, did you find yourself maybe, wanting to experiment with some of the things that you had done professionally with the voices and the different sounds that you make in, the gaming setting?
Definitely. I would say that one of the first games that really got me into not only just video games, like in the storyline of them, but the acting behind them was the Metal Gear Solid series. As a kid, I'm just playing this, like, sitting there, not skipping the cutscene, like, this is amazing, and just being so drawn in, and was like doing whole scenes, like memorizing them between, like, Liquid Snake, brother, Liquid. Like, I would just do that. I would do the conversations back and forth, and I was just drawn in. Like, it's just always the storyline would get me. The first Halo was huge for me. When I was hearing, like, the Covenant, like, you had the grunts that were here, Master Chief, and then you had, like, the Jackals, which were just like, there was, like, weird backwards stuff. The Elites, which was just the act for Sarge reversed. What? No! And I just assumed, oh, there's a guy doing that. And then I watched behind the scenes, like, no, that's an effect with, like, pitching. And I'm like, I'm doing this the hard way. But I love that. And just, I play D&D regularly with friends. I love just pretty much anything kind of media-wise. It's just, I don't know, there's not much I don't like. I mean, I don't really like huge open world games. I like games with a set storyline, point A to point B, maybe a few side missions. But if it's giant open world, I get lost because then I'm like, it's too much. Where's the main storyline? Because then I kind of like lose focus. But
every
that's kind of
Assassin's Creed game ever.
Like
the storylines that they have now are just so loosely. They barely hold the game together, but I mean that's not.
I mean, as an actor, I'm all for it because that means a lot more roles and a lot.
Oh, I was gonna say.
Oh yeah.
I'm cool with that part, but playing them, I'm like, that's a lot of stuff.
I always tell people for voice actors who do a lot of video games, like the 3 best letters in the alphabet are DLC. Because you're like, and we're getting called back in. Excellent. Expansion pack, let's do it.
Unless of course it's I'm sorry, go ahead. I interrupted you.
Oh no, I was just gonna say my friend has already put like something 124 hours into that one game alone, Valhalla, AC Valhalla. I was like, good thing it's COVID. Otherwise I would be very concerned. But no, they're huge. Those games are massive. And that is a lot of money. That is a lot of roles for people too, which is great. Sure. We need that.
What were you gonna say, Mark?
I was gonna say, unless of course it's Skyrim, and somehow wherever you go, it's always the same 3 people. I don't know. I've never looked at the voice acting credits, so I don't know if it's true. But I remember playing that game and being like, I swear I just heard this guy on the other side of the map.
Well, I will say, so I'm in Elder Scrolls Online, and I think I did like 10 different characters for that game. And for the most part, it's like, okay, now I'm the Nordic character, now I'm the Scottish character, then random, because I'm the screamy person. So but no, I mean, because that's the reality. And Scott, you can obviously attest to that too. Like for those of us who are utility players, we're not usually the leads, we're the ones that come in and do all the ancillary roles. It's like you go in, you get your 3 to 4 voices for the session, hopefully they call you back in. So they're not casting 500 actors for that game.
Totally. And no shade, Skyrim's amazing.
Oh no, Skyrim,
it's just not for me, but
I love it.
Great game.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't say it's a bad game. It's been re-released on every console since it came out, so you can't say it's a bad game.
I started it in VR and then got a little nauseous and stopped, and I should go back.
No, VR, I couldn't do that. I think that'd be too much for me.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been living in, over a year of COVID style of this junk. So how has that affected your careers? Like, I know a lot of people have in-home studios now. Like, what does that look like for you guys as far as like finishing job, like getting jobs and then doing them and then sending that off to the studio?
Well, I have a home studio. I've had one since I moved out here, and I had one when I used to live in Florida. So not much changed. It all went either straight to home, or if I did go in studio, it was like, okay, COVID test, your own booth, all this stuff. So it was complicated. So I'm happy to get vaccinated and kind of not worry about that as much. But from home, like, we've done a few things, have a bunch of people on a Zoom call, and you record, you use different programs to like not to worry about you recording it, and they just record it on their end. And yeah, so not much change. I miss going in studio because I prefer that much more, because not only are the rooms bigger for the stuff that I do, but you get to see people, and I miss that a lot.
Yeah.
So I would say it's been pivoting more towards home, but I assume and I hope it's going to go back to more open, big rooms, because when we record movies and stuff, it's like 15 to 20 of us in a giant room, and I miss that.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. Like going from that experience of like everybody recording like these voice acting sessions, and then you're just like, all right, well, I guess I'm just gonna get into character, and there's the laundry I didn't do. Great.
I'm still in my pajamas.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't work in my pajamas. I have to like get fully dressed, do my hair, or else I'm not getting anything done.
Same.
It's just impossible.
Yeah.
I would say I'm on the lucky end of the people affected by COVID. Like, COVID's been so horrible for so many people, so I kind of feel bad saying it, but it is just a fact that COVID has kind of been the reason I've been able to go full time and have been doing this business so well, because so many people are stuck at home and they're like, you know what, I think it is time to take being a metal vocalist seriously, and then they hit me up, you know. And I think that that'll continue once the restrictions are lifted, for sure. And even if it does subside a little bit, I think I'd still be like, yeah, let's get these lifted once it's safe to do so. But for me, I mean, it is a grind. I will tell you that. Like, it is today is one of the most days off I've ever had. It was so weird. I got to like wake up and like my wife and I went to breakfast and I was like, oh yeah, that's what this is like. But overall, it's very beneficial. I've been lucky. So it's worked out.
Yeah. Well, and you say a grind. So what is like your day to day like?
Oh,
do you mean grind like grindcore, or like?
Yeah, exactly. It's a grind.
Well played. So I recently reduced the amount of days. I was doing lessons 4 days a week. And when I have a lesson day, I do 6 lessons a day. And that's usually, so each lesson's like 50 minutes. And then there's follow up. There's like me setting all the exercises, staying in contact with my students via email, like Discord community stuff, making YouTube videos. And then on my non-lesson days, usually Monday, I'm making videos just all day. So even like I'll just be like, oh, so this song and this vocalist, change my shirt, move the coffee cup. Sometimes I'm too lazy. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not even changing my shirt. But sometimes you make minor adjustments so it looks like it's a different day. And so Monday is just all videos. Tuesday is a really cool day. That's when I just work on my own voice. I tell everybody to shove off, and I just practice my own craft, because I was getting kind of behind on my own skills. So I was like, ooh, I got to take time to eat. You know, I'm cooking for everybody. Got to take time to eat. So yeah, it's just really busy, but I'm lucky to be busy. You know.
I love that you brought that up. So working on your own skills, your own voice. And I would love to ask you guys both that, because, you know, you have been working professionals for a very long time. But what are the things that you're still working on? What are the things that you're trying to tweak, or things you want to do that you haven't done?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. I mean, day to day, I mean, I'll hear something sound wise, even just in music, listening to a band, and it's like, that's really good. I can use that as an actor, or anything, like a bad impression of like Lemmy from Motorhead, just you can make like a really ridiculous, like drunken sailor, and you can use that. Because I'm like, I don't want to learn to do a full Lemmy. That's like literally Jack Daniels and cigarettes, but I can take a kind of understanding of him and use him a little bit, because I'm listening to a lot of Motorhead recently, obviously, and just use that and just kind of adapt it and go, okay, let me get this, and kind of take it, use it, and put it in my actor's toolbox. And then just whenever it comes out, I'll have it, because I was definitely slacking in the first part of 2020. I'm like, oh, I'm good. But then kind of been doing this 10 years now. So it kind of bit me like, hey, why don't you just go find random stuff and just grab onto it? And I'm also crazy because I'll hear the sound design from a movie of how they did the monster. And I'm like, I know that's like 5 dolphins and a whale and a lion, like a trash can. I'm going to try and find how to do some of those harmonics. And I'll just pick it out like the... Okay, cool. I've got that part. Find the subharmonic, cool. Record them both at the same time and go, all right, that plays. So I'm in a session, I can at least tell them like, hey, I know when we do monsters for like the huge ones, you mainly just want our breath and like the physicality you can't get. You can't record a line like breathing and doing a scene, but you can get us to go like to give it that quality to put through like 1,000 expanders. But I told them, hey, I can also give you these weird screeches to play with, and it's going to help out. And so that makes them not have to go to a sound bank, and it gives them an organic sound. So I like doing that just to have in my back pocket of like, okay, before I go, I've got 5 minutes left. You want like ridiculous low harmonics? Okay. Just to give them. Because in the end of the day, we're always trying to get called back in because you want to say, hey, I still have more color to paint with. I know you wanted this, but I still have plenty more. And that's kind of what it's like. And that's why I'm always trying to expand and learn new things. Because when you get stagnant, that's when you start getting replaced. Because now you're phoning in, you're too cautious, you're too, oh my God, you're texting, yeah, here's the line. You don't want that. Because then you don't want to be there. Why do they want you there?
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a whole lot of sense. For me, honestly, it's now that, so before vocal coaching, I was my own vocalist, and this is the way I scream, these are the sounds I make, this is the music that we write, like, and then once I started vocal coaching, I'd have people who'd be like, yeah, can you teach me how to do like a triple backflip, sow cow, whistle scream, Mach 5? And I'd be like, I don't even know what that is, bruh. Like, so like there's a lot of me just kind of keeping up with vocal trends, like what are people doing in music. And you'll always eventually hit a space where something's outside of your range, or like whatever, but just having like an understanding of it and being able to, if something's like super far out, I'll generally not teach it. But if I've got a good handle on it, I'll go ahead and teach people how to do it. For my own personal skills, though, for me, with the music my band's been writing, I got to sing higher. So I'm like a very baritone, third octave, first half of the fourth octave kind of guy. And so now I'm trying to get just more, like, I can handle the upper fourth octave. I just am not as consistent as I would like to be. I'd love to have good chord closure in the fifth octave without having to flip into that like falsetto sound, but not quite there yet. Not quite there yet. It's interesting. I even vocal coach. I even take vocal lessons sometimes. I'll hit up some people I know and I'll be like, yo, like, you're a vocal coach, you specialize in opera. Like Elizabeth from the Charismatic Voice and Julia Nyland, they both sometimes are like, yo, you want to teach me how to gurgle and I'll teach you how? And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So that's for me, like my own personal skills, a lot of what I'm trying to do, just getting used to singing higher, because our music is getting that need,
Mark, quick question about that. Do you think that comes from guitarists getting lower and lower tuned guitars? So that's taking up the mix and you're realizing like, oh, the vocal, like in the 80s and 90s with death metal, it was like, okay, we're generally in like maybe D standard, if that. Yeah. And, the guitars are high gain, but now they've got like camphors and all this that like you can get down super low. And so the vocals now are conflicting the mix. Do you think that's part of it?
I think that's a huge part of it. Especially because you're right. There's a lot of down tuning going on. Like and maybe this is just my own experience, but when I see somebody playing a six string in standard tuning, I'm like, what year is it? I'm like, maybe. Yeah, maybe if I was like hanging out with like pop punk people, or like like maybe like bar, like I don't like to say bar rock because people take that as a slur, but I think
bar rock.
I love me some bar rock.
I do too.
I don't mean it bad, but like there it makes sense. But like deathcore and death metal, it's just like, oh my God, that's a six string.
I'm one of those people that's nuts, and I'm like, it doesn't get heavier when it comes to like thrash, like Fight Fire with Fire, Domination by Pantera. Like that's E standard, dude. And I'm like, that's crushing. But I also do love the heavier stuff. But I'm like, I like that. If you're heavy with E, you can do anything. You
can do a lot, and you're so right too, because like when the guitars and the rhythm it's taking up that low and mid section, it's like my like third octave voice just kind of sounds redundant, you know? So I think that's a large part of it. Also, people love tenors. People love tenors.
Hey, what's up?
Yeah. You know, people love the tenor. And all of us baritones out there are like, it's possible, but
baritones never get enough love, and you gotta appreciate the voice that it's same thing with altos. It's like you gotta appreciate the voice that can kind of straddle to other,
Now they always cast the baritone in the Disney movie. Baritone, oh, it's the villain song. Be prepared. Could you imagine a tenor villain? Be prepared.
I feel like a tenor villain would be awesome. No, a tenor villain would be awesome. I think it'd be a good.
I think it'd be a new typecast, a new different play differently, but
yeah, Batman the musical with the Joker
as a tenor.
As a tenor, that would be sick.
That is actually a good idea.
That would be sick. The Joker,
because then Batman's the baritone, yeah.
Yeah, Batman would have to be. You can't.
There you go.
I would say though, for baritones though, you can do a lot with timbre. You don't always have to sound down here. You can smile. You can bring it open a little bit. Michael Bublé, for example, he's a really awesome baritone. But
Hugh Jackman, when he sang in Greatest Showman, if he did sing, I think he was a baritone.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember off the top of my head, but it just sounds right. So we'll say yes. Yeah, but timbre goes a long way. Timbre
definitely.
And cadence.
Yeah. So we know that, vocals, all that stuff, vocals change, like the trends change, music trends change. Would you say that that's also the same kind of for, voice acting too, where maybe it's just like, this is the year of the vampire, this is the year of the zombies, or this is, do you guys find that you are starting to have to kind of bend how you train your voice and what you are focusing on to kind of lean into those trends of what maybe the audience and or a casting director wants as far as what's popular?
I think it kind of depends. I know that for a while in animation, we had this kind of big hipstery trend of the character doesn't care. You're animated, but you're also not expressive. So that was kind of a trend for a while. Right now, it's kind of wild what they want. Disney's got its style, Nickelodeon's got its style, Cartoon Network is literally all over the place. So it kind of depends, but it's weird. They'll tell us okay, enunciate, be animated. Then it's don't enunciate, but don't be animated. It's this weird kind of tightrope walk. And apparently the announcers back in, I don't know. It's everyone's always talking about stuff. I just know I just do what I do and I listen. In terms of the monsters and stuff, zombies have been changing constantly. They keep being called infected now, but they're no longer, I think they don't call them zombies anymore because people say zombie, they think the not scary zombie. So infected with 28 Days Later or the remake of Dawn of the Dead, they sound much scarier.
Yeah.
And so that's been obviously a trend where in The Walking Dead, they're not so much threatening as they're just scenery. So they're just
yeah.
So it's you just shove them. They're not scary anymore. They're an obstacle. But when I worked on Zombieland 2, they were aggressive, and they actually had a variant that was called the T-800 that was just literally the Terminator didn't stop. You had to keep shooting it. So not only did I have to do the standard they're okay, we need them to be scarier and bigger. So I'm all right, let me unlock my chest open. So I had to go there to make it bigger and more threatening when I'm already okay, guys, this is already trying to kill you. You want something even okay? So I guess that's a trend is that. And I guess creatures they go back and forth with about sound design or a human. And I think that I'm hoping they just, use humans more because you can only use so many Whale 5 or Lion Roar 2 and effects to make a creature. It's just that human element, that life element's just mwah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and Mark, you were saying you've been adjusting what you've been singing, based on your own band's changing style.
There definitely are trends within. It's interesting. So deathcore is the most of all the metal genres. Deathcore is the most I would say expositional vocally. Because in death metal, which there is a difference in death metal, it's very much more about sound huge, sound emotional, and sound aggressive, and that's really the goal. Whereas in deathcore, there's always somebody trying to push the envelope and do something new. So a couple years ago, it was how good are your gutturals, which is that very forward resonant low sound, right? And then in the past couple years, it's like how good are your like whistle screams? So like hitting that whistle register with a fry, which I don't even have that down. And like now it's kind of circling to like tunnel throat sounds, which I don't really like that term, but that's when you create like that sort of sound. So there's a lot of people playing around like with that like those type of sounds, creating those secondary resonant pockets. And so I'll have to scan the internet and I'll be like, oh, somebody's talking about like a drop kick mid. What is that? And I'm just like, I gotta figure it out. Like I'm gonna get an email in a day, I guarantee it, with somebody being like, yo, can you teach me to do the Mach 6 peppermint high? And I'll be like, you got it, dude. You know what I mean? So yeah, there definitely are those trends as well, although I think they might be a little bit more short-lived than voice acting trends, because people, they, especially in deathcore, they always want the cool new sound, like just boom, hit me with it, you know.
Yeah,
So
it's funny you mentioned the tunnel throat thing, because that's what I did to get a more massive zombie. Was I went and then I made that little thing in that little pocket to get it bigger. So that's like, that's kind of funny. That kind of lines up.
Yeah, you know, I talk with my students a lot too who have difficulty. I always tell them, not that I'm a voice actor, but I'll always say like, okay, let's not be musicians. If they're just struggling, I'm like, let's not be musicians for a second. We're not musicians. We're voice actors, and you're gonna summon like your inner dog. Like, this is a classic false chord exercise. So I want you to bark. You know, I always tell them, you're in a high-rise studio. You're in like New York, and I'm like, they're gonna pay you $10,000 to do the best like angry dog, and they're like, okay. And sometimes that helps. So they'll go from being like and struggling, and they'll like oh, and I'm like, there you go. And then we take it back more of a musical route. But sometimes I'll tell people, it's like, let's just pretend we're voice actors. And sometimes they're like, oh, do you do voice acting? And I'll be like, I don't know the first thing about it. But
you get them out of their comfort zone, though, and you get them to not be
we
tense.
Just switch the lens. Yeah, you switch the lens, basically. Yeah.
You play a little bit.
Yeah. So what is something that, this could go either way, that you are really proud of that you did, or something that was just like really weird and off the wall that you're like, I actually did that. That's amazing.
You can go first, Mark, because I love music. I want to hear about this.
Okay, sure. So it's actually probably one of the things I'm the most proud of is not with my main band, Kardavoc. That's the band that like 99% of the work is going on with. It was with a small little black metal project we did called Never Breath. And at the end, I was like, okay, this is the outro of the album. The album's got a really weird concept, so I probably will keep your podcast PG-13. But it's basically like the person has sacrificed themselves to this deity, and so I wanted to simulate like a baby crying, because they're, anyways, it's no babies were harmed. It's just a symbol. But basically, like, he's going through like a transformation, like he's going from an adult to an adolescent to a baby, and then like ceasing to exist. And so what I did was I took my hands, because I was like, this is going to be so distorted, it doesn't matter. I took my hands and I sort of cupped them like this, and then I created this like really high like noise, and I just sort of like and it sounds really silly like that, but mixed in, pushed back with a little reverb, it sounds almost exactly like a little baby crying in another room. And we listened back, and all of us were like, ugh, that's so uncomfortable. We nailed it, you know? So
yeah,
it wasn't like the most comfortable thing to do. So I wouldn't like go around being like, let me teach you the baby scream. Because I definitely had to rest a little bit when I was done. I would say it was very taxing, but it really worked. It worked in an awful and disgusting way. But for black metal, well, there you go.
I mean, it's true cult. Nailed it.
True cult, yeah, man. If it doesn't sound like it's out in the woods, recorded with a potato in a cave.
Hey, you leave the cassette recording out in the woods. I always used to joke. You remember the Immortal video? It's the classic Call of the Winter Moon.
Yes.
My friends, I used to joke like, Sven has to wear the witch hat. Shut up, guys. Just like running around trying to be scary, and it's like
like prancing through the woods, like Like I love black metal, but there is definitely a
Oh,
very goofy. There is such a goofy corner of it where you just like can't take it seriously.
I used to tell friends, they're like, "How do you sing a black metal guy?" I was like, "Oh, you just stub your toe." Every black metal song starts with the ah.
Oh yeah.
Every black metal song.
Oh yeah. You got to do it.
Oh my gosh. And so Scott, what are either most proud of or like was just like so off the wall you're like, I'm doing what?
I would say 2 moments. In Last of Us 2, they wanted new sounds for the stalkers between the runners and the clickers, those horrifying ones in Last of Us are like, okay, in the first game we just made them sound like the runners the exact same, but they really overhauled them in Last of Us 2 to make them different. So they became more like, in the session I was like, oh, this is like a fungus raptor. So I had to kind of bridge the typical like the pain screaming of someone who's infected trying not to turn with the just completely gone like weird clicky stuff. And so I came up with this thing and they were like, okay, imagine you've got like a growth in your throat, like choking your airwaves. I'm like, and they're like, oh, that's perfect. And then kind of help give it a language to the stalkers, kind of really bridge the gap. And the fans realized they're like, oh, the stalkers were really scary in the first game. And this game, they're like, this is the worst thing ever. And there's like several encounters of these things. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. And I'm also happy I was the first one that actually shows up with like, hey, this is the stalker. And in Zombieland 2, one of my proudest and most disgusting memories and moments is we were doing a queue where one of the characters, they show up and they're like, it's the funny, like, oh, look, it's the same characters. It's Tallahassee and whatever Ohio's name is. And it's like, oh, that's them, but they're more goofy and exaggerated. And they go, we're going to take care of these zombies. They go out, they do it. They both get bit and they turn. And so my queue starts, it's 2 minutes. Guys, like, I'm fine. I'm not a zombie. Vomit. So I've got to do the vomit. And then now I'm this T-800 zombie that's the big, brutal, bigger guy. And he just chases him around for 2 minutes straight. So I do this queue after I've watched it, like, okay, all right, I'm going to do it. And I just do the whole thing chasing him around, all this stupid shit. I can say that word, right?
Yeah. You're totally fine.
Okay, cool. And then
Totally
there's
fine.
one point where he puts like an 8-ball mail. There's a pool table, and I've got to do that. So what I do for the queue is I go, I literally shove my fist in my mouth and make it. And then I like spit it out and then go do all this stuff and then get killed by actually my favorite actress, Rosario Dawson. So I was very happy about that. And I'm covered in spit and saliva. I'm disgusting. Everyone's like, that's amazing. And she's like, can you do one more thing for me? I'm like, yeah, what? Can you just make like a pop sound in your mouth again for the little spitting the cue ball out? And I was like, okay. And they're like, perfect. And I was so proud that I was like, guys, I'll hug you later. Let me go shower. Because this is like 2019 before any of the pandemic. No one cared that I was spitting everywhere, but I was so happy. And I watched it in theaters being like, that was one take.
That's awesome.
That's amazing.
That is so, I like how you just were like, this is kind of like cue ball shaped.
No, I was like, I can do that. It was a trick I used to do in elementary school. And I'm like, why not? If it sucks, they'll say do it again.
Right. Genius.
I love that. So as we get close to the end here, you know, obviously this is an ever-changing industry. Nothing is ever certain for anybody. But what are some things you're looking forward to doing or just really want to do?
Go ahead, Mark.
I got to think about it. So
okay.
I'm actually going to say you go because I'm like.
That's why I wanted to. Okay.
That's a
all
great
right.
question.
Improvisation. Former Iowa West alumni. Yeah, I'm looking forward to. And I don't want to put that out in case I fail. I'm looking forward to maybe I would say doing much more like big creatures because I do a lot of the more humanoid. They like it because I bring a human element because a lot of people when they do that stuff apparently they're like, oh, they're always being too like they're trying to creature to try and impress us, like, you know how to like draw it back and still remain like the humanness. And I'm like, yeah, it's the uncanny valley. That's why you're afraid of a zombie, is like that looks human but it's not. It's that weird little unsettling thing. So even when I do like the more massive stuff, I like the element of like, hey, do you want me to like do some vague whispers of like, so it's like even when you're hearing this horrible screech, you hear this thing inside of it. And it's like, I don't know what that is, but I feel something like putting the hairs up my back of my neck. So
I feel something very upsetting when you did that. So yeah.
The opposite of ASMR.
Yeah, that's the worst thing about horror games is it's it's not the big scary stuff for me. It's it's the little whispers.
It's the
dissonant
quiet
whispers.
stuff.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
It's like the anticipation of something happening. So more projects like Last of Us 2 that really like to play.
Well, they're
with the
rebooting
uncanny
it
valley.
apparently for PS5. So there you go.
Hey, I don't know if we'll get a paycheck again for it, but we'll see. Stuff like that. And say, I like playing Monster Ton. I love them, but I want to do also kid shows because I like that duality of just like, I'm this horrible monster, but also I'm like, you know, the voice, the cute and cuddly little thing that's like, hey kids, can we count to 5? Here we go. Like, that's just fun because then you get to call the kids who are like sad and you get to make them happy. I don't think many kids are going to be like, I'm sad. Can you make horrible sounds for me to cheer me up? I mean, I hope I find like a fan base like that in the future of like, you want to hear this awful? Yeah, do the dying death wail. Like, all right.
Only good kids are going to be that bunch. Those are the best ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and that I don't know about you, Scott, but I find myself because I do so many video games. So then when I go to animation, like usually, you know, like if I'm coaching or something and it's like, that was great. Can you make her less scary?
Yeah.
Like,
I get
I'm
that.
sorry. They're like, it's still like a bad person or an evil character, but it's still for kids. So not video game scary. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah. I always ask them like, okay, so we're working with this monster. Like, okay, do you want like a Sesame Street monster? Do you want like a middle school Y7 monster? Or do you want the like R-rated movie monster? And they're like, the Y7. Okay, so a little scary, but not like you could eventually hug the monster. But that always helps me. It's like, okay, what's the tone of the project? Do you guys really want a monster? Or do you want like, monster? That's adorable and funny.
Yeah.
So I think tone's important.
Yeah.
Mark, have you had enough time to think about what you want to do? Or should we keep stalling?
Well, sir, thank you for asking. I think
what do you mean, your voice, Zach? You got it.
Mostly, you know, obviously our music is changing, but I think one thing that I'm really enjoying with like the like doing the YouTube thing and doing the vocal coach thing is kind of expanding the fan base a little bit, maybe expanding, reaching out to people who wouldn't want to be vocalists who now can, because sometimes metal vocals can be a little samey. Listen, if I'm saying it, like, it's just true. I get it. That sounded pompous. That's not what I mean. It's like I'm willing to admit that sometimes metal vocals are samey. That's what I mean. Yeah. But I think that it's going to be good to get some more people involved, kind of expand that reach, get a little bit more like diversity of sound, and also, you know, maybe to encourage people not to, I don't know, as much as it helps with the paycheck when there are like all these new deathcore sounds that people want to get, maybe introducing some like, hey, like it's cool to have like a million different sounds that you can do, but how can I help you be an artist? Like, I can have every tool in the world, but that doesn't mean I'm a carpenter, right? Yeah. How can I help you be an artist? How can I help you convey artistic messages with this? And I think getting people maybe a little bit more interested in that. Like, I would rather listen to a vocalist who can do 2 really cool sounds, but there's so much emotion and passion, versus someone who's got 10,000 sounds, but it's just like, I get it, man. Like, you got a conveyor belt. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. You're doing some sounds I can't do, but you know, so I think maybe trying to inject a little bit of that mentality into the metal vocal world would make me feel good if I was able to do that.
Well, and we get the exact same thing in voiceover. Is I can't tell you how many times coaches and casting directors have said it's not about the voice, it's about the acting. And you know, I have people reach out to me, they're like, I want to get into voiceover because I can do all these cool zany voices, and I'm like, that's actually 2% of it, you know. So I love that you said that, Mark, because it's so true.
Yeah, it's a really common thing with the younger group of metal fans to be like, I love that metal vocalist because he's got so many crazy voices he can do. And then as people get older, they're like, actually, I kind of am over that now because I'm not sensing a lot of like emotion behind it. So there's definitely some crossover there from what I'm learning here.
And then there's Mike Patton, which can do 1,000 sounds and just have such beautiful emotion no matter what he does.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, all these sounds that are new, Mike Patton already did them.
Yeah, it's
a long time ago. You know,
I remember talking to friends in like high school. It was like, oh, have you heard this new thing? I was like, oh yeah, Mike Patton did this scream on this Mr. Bungle record in '95, and they're like, they're like, oh, he did. And I was like, yeah.
Whistle screams, Mike Patton, and then Kyo from Deer and Grey, like They've been doing that forever, you know.
For real.
Yeah.
But it's still taking the old and making it new and doing something different with it. And that's the whole point of music. Like, look, everyone's played all the same chords. We've all got those chords. Just do something that means something to you and make it awesome.
Yeah. Well, that's a great place to end this. And like, we could keep talking to you guys for hours, I know, because there's so much here, but thank you both for joining us. This was fantastic.
Thank you for having us.
Where can we do you have anything you want to announce, or, you know, of course, just let us know again where people can find you and how they can follow all the amazing things that you're doing. Mark, let's start with you.
Sure. So the two main things to keep an eye out for me are if you enjoy like vocal technique, checking out the YouTube channel Kardavoc Academy. I've got a strange amount of people who watch my channel who they're like, I'm not even really a metal fan. I just enjoy hearing this stuff broken down, and people saying like, I didn't know there was so much technique behind like you know, but there's like a lot that you have to do to make that work. So Kardavoc Academy YouTube channel if you're into that sort of thing, and then my main band, Kardashev, we have a lot of things happening that are very exciting that I'm like contractually not able to talk about. But so Kardashev is the band, Kardavoc Academy is the YouTube channel, and so keep an eye on those if you feel so inclined.
Yay! And Scott.
Nice. Yeah, I'll tell you to check out your band, man.
Thanks.
Do you miss that?
You
Great
know,
set, and I'll check out your band. And there's never.
Do you got a CD?
Yeah, man. Oh, Army Cash. Just want to know if you had them. Thanks, dude.
That is a real conversation.
Right.
No, I don't have any money to pay. I just want to know if you had them, and you're like,
I'd rather just hear a great set and you leave than it's like.
So we basically just used up oxygen for no reason. Cool.
Yeah.
Right. See ya. Bye.
Anyway, not really much you can announce because it's all up in the ether.
I figured. Yeah. NDAs,
I've been at this for 10 years, so yay meet for this. Follow my socials at Scott Lambright. I don't really post much about work, but I post, pictures of plants, maybe my instruments, pretty stuff when I'm on a walk.
Yeah.
My TikTok is just stupid and full of nothing and no followers. I don't care.
You're like, I'm having fun. Yeah.
Sounds
That's
like
just
the
whatever. It's
content
when I'm
I
bored, I'll make
love.
something.
I know, right?
Plants, pretty things on walks, and stupid.
That's
love
it.
it.
When people are like, "What did you post about? What did you do in like impression challenges?" I'm like, I don't care.
I know when I saw
I
those
like
voice
plants.
challenges going around, I was like,
Yeah, it's like 1,000 people done it. I'd rather just do a weird thing, just whatever.
Yeah.
I may do something on YouTube eventually of like, oh, here's a bunch of weird creatures because I'm bored. Done.
How the best YouTube channels are born.
Yeah. They're bored. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us, you both.
Yes.
And
Of course.
Yeah,
you,
thank you
guys.
so much for coming on.
Thanks for having us.
I just have to announce that we are powered by Culture Slate. So please go check out their Patreon, give $1 or more than $1, and support this channel as well as theirs. Also, please check out Culture Slate's YouTube channel, their website, like, subscribe, hit that bell, and please, if you liked our content here, do the same for us. We'd really appreciate it.
yay. We'll see you next week.
Yes,
guys.
we will see you next week. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
No problem. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
5 seconds on fire. Ah! Done.